So, when does a study become a final painting? Well, today, as a matter of fact, I'm going to take one of my studies into a full painting, and I have a commentary all the way through. Let you see into my thought process as I do it. Something a lot of you asked for. Are you ready? Let's go. Well, hello there, minders. Welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. I'm Steve Mitchell, and we are doing some painting today. Now, if you've been following my episodes, you saw this a few weeks back, where we were focusing on land rhythms, how land rhythms dovetail and flow into each other, create these neat rhythms. And I really love these horizontal compositions. And I thought I would like to pick one and do a full painting. And I think that's going to be this one. This was my favorite. I liked them all, but that was my favorite. And I'm going not that much bigger, but I'm using this horizontal block. This is a 5.9 inch by 11.8 inch. Very horizontal format. Harsh 140 pound paper. I've got it taped off. And we're going to use this as our guide. Now, this was kind of wintry in color, kind of cool colors. I want to take it a little more towards spring. Because what we're seeing now is a lot of the vibrant greens. You know, these leaves, rather than sparse branches, are starting to bud out. So we're going to warm it up some, maybe get a brighter sky. That's what I want to do. It's going to be fairly spontaneous, but using that one as a guide. Hopefully you can see this palette. At some points I may zoom in a bit. I'm back to using my Mary Blue 6-color set again. Just having a blast using that, getting to know those colors. And yes, you can kind of get springy with it, and I'll show you how that happens. Alright, well, I'm going to go with a fairly bright sky this time. And I think what I'm going to do is I've got some of the Stalo turquoise, a little bit of the indigo, and a little bit of quinacridone lake. You grab spray bottle real quick, but it makes for pretty neat edges on the clouds. And bada bing, bada boom, there you go. Very simple little sky, but nice and bright. We're going to give that some time to dry. And the blotting has just been to stop the flow from being too aggressive down there. And I still have a nice organic fading out edge, so I'm not worried about layers of landscape coming on top of that. Okay, and as I'm watching it dry, it's getting pretty faint, so I'm just adding a few darker touches. I like that a little better, a little darker in places. You would think after 40, 50 years of painting, I'd be used to the drying shift. I'm not. I know it's coming, and I still am surprised sometimes by it. Alright, this is nice and dry. Let's go in with our first layers and do our little high contrast thing. I'm going to start with some rolling hills. I'll be putting a little more effort into it than this. These were pretty quick. So I want to add a little more aerial perspective, which is, the cooler distant versus warming up layers as you go. But I still want a good bit of contrast. I'm going to let my brush do the work rather than try to stroke it too much. Adding a little bit of color variegation in here, so we've got a little bit of yellow ochre rather than just a flat color. And these edges I want to make sure they're not completely cut out looking, so a little finger dry brushing maybe, and get some cool sort of linear edge transitions there. To get a little bit of backwash there, that's actually pretty nice because it looks like trees. Coming forward, I think I can come forward with that without touching and bleeding into that. Let's get a little bit warmer, a little more variegated. I'm not really sure what's going to look good here. Got some indigo, some quinacridone lake. Let's throw in a little bit of dragon's blood. Let's see how that looks. Now we're going to get a little bit more. Oh, that's not dark enough. And I really want to variegate this, so let's bring in some of that yellow ochre. Going to come up here and meet that. But we still want to get some greens in there, so just all kind of stuff happening in those woods. Some more extreme green up here. There we go. So we've got some nice, so it's kind of olive into browns and red browns. And as this layer comes around, we're going to get some more brilliant greens going. And I'm just pulling in some phthalo turquoise along with yellow ochre. And that's really kind of interesting. I love that. We've got all kinds of colors, just indicating that there's a lot of springy green life happening there. Now I'm just, with a wet brush, I'm just kind of letting some of that soften. And I want to keep these simple edge transitions. Just really loving that. All right, I'm really happy with the way this is looking. We had some happy accident backwashes here that just really worked out well. Here, 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 and here. So let's continue. Now we're going to put in the foreground. And I'm leaving these big, bright white areas. They'll probably be tinted, but those are going to be like field or meadow, and I want that contrast. So let's get going with some yellow ochre. We're going to put in some phthalo turquoise and hunter green. Now, where these overlap transparently, they can create a new shape. So I'm really fine with that. It's actually kind of cool, kind of interesting cool. I'm losing some of those nice lemony highlights. Maybe I'll do this. Let's just blot it, since I don't want to just keep taking time for it to dry. I love how I can follow the same layout, basic composition, and change the colors, change a few things. And the washes will do their own thing, and we can have a totally different looking piece. I love that. I'm getting some backwashes here that I'm hoping will be kind of cool, or interesting, cool. I don't want to fiddle with it too much, or it'll look overworked. Nice, I like that. I am going to let it dry now. All right, well, we're back to having some bone dry paper here. So I'm going to continue to add some layers. I want you to just, again, notice how I'm keeping these white areas. I'm able a little bit more to tell as I get further into this painting how much value, if any value or color, I want to add to those areas by the surrounding color. I'm just going to get some yellow ochre. We're going to start up here in the front. Get some yellow ochre and some of that phthalo turquoise. Maybe a little of the hooker's green. Get a nice rich green. All right, so now we're just going to go ahead and put in some trees, complete our composition here. When you're doing foliage like this, this is what I call winter bare tree sort of texture or painting. No foliage. Those marks out there are meant to indicate, the fine branches you can't see. And sometimes you can paint those first and then match up the branches to the shape. However, now we're into spring kind of landscape. I'm going to have a little more foliage showing. So I just want to go ahead and paint my trees first with the branch structure, and then we'll add some foliage. Painting trees, the branches always get thicker towards the base. They never go from thick to thin as they go down. They go from thick to thin as they go up and out. And however you want to draw them or render them is up to you. I sometimes find it easier to pull, when I'm drawing. And that's kind of what you're doing when you do trees. You're kind of drawing. And as I pull, I can add pressure and create a thicker base or thicker trunk. If you go up, just make sure you start with a thicker branch and get thinner. I know some loose painters that just go and quickly throw these branches in, and that's fine. That's their style. I'm a little bit more circumspect and meticulous about it. I like to kind of design these trees, how I like them to look. These finer branches, they kind of cluster towards the edge. You may get finer branches down here, especially on more irregular trees. But generally, the finer branches will cluster. If it's a nicely symmetrical tree, the finer branches will cluster out here towards the edge. And again, you may get irregular trees, especially trees that have lost limbs, they've been trimmed, or they've died and fallen off. You may get irregular sort of shapes, but in general, a healthy tree will have a fairly uniform canopy. It's up to you. You want to study tree reference, paint a lot of them. I paint a lot of trees, so I can tend to make these things up if I want to. But I only make them up because I've studied quite a lot of them and painted quite a lot of them. Up here, I probably should switch to a smaller brush. I can get a little more suggestive with those fine details. I like to add a few smaller companions. I just always tend to have trouble when I go from the base up. I always do better when I come out and in. And it may be different for you in terms of your brush control. You should experiment and know, what kind of brush control works best for you. Gives you the best results. If you're doing this and you have trouble controlling your brush, try something different. All right, now what I'm going to do is get as bright a green as I can. This is, again, a very earthy palette. I don't have a lot of bright greens on here, but we're going to get some yellow ochre, tad bit of turquoise, and I'm just going to do this. These are new spring buds. So you don't have a lot of thick foliage yet that's hiding the branches, which is why I spent a lot of time putting in those branches. Otherwise, I could have gone in and just densed out that foliage. And it's not a real wet brush, and I'm just kind of stroking down. Other brushes this works well with are fan brushes, even riggers. I've done this with riggers. But it works with the bigger brushes. You just have to make sure it's not super wet, or you'll just have a blob. And these sort of yellow greens are what you'll see on these trees as they start to leaf out. When you're designing and rendering trees, unless you just have a really loose style, which that's fine if you do, but if you're trying to put, some detail and thought into it, take your time. You're not in any hurry. Don't rush it. Slow down. Enjoy the process. Savor the process. The process and loving the process is what will get you painting time and time again. You go just by results and turning out a painting, you will be frustrated a lot. So much that I do, and I enjoy painting it, and I see, what I want to do different. And if I'm just going by the results, it's a bit of a letdown sometimes. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have results that you're really proud of. I'm not saying you shouldn't be shooting for those, but you will miss the mark. Everybody does. Make these branches overlap too, because you're looking through a tree where all the branches are in front of each other. I've done videos on Patreon about trees for my patrons, and one thing we talk about is don't do pressed flower trees. Trees that look like they've been pressed in a book, like a flower. Go out and study them. Look at how they show depth. Think about how you can show depth when you're painting and drawing them. Draw them. Draw them with a pencil if you're having trouble before you try to tackle them with paint. Because pencils are usually pretty easy to draw with, and pencils, great way to draw trees, because there's not, it's a fairly linear thing. All right, and again, up here I'm going to get kind of wispy and suggestive, since the eye can't pick up a lot of those fine branches. I stroke sideways towards the center of the tree. A lot of times these tree shapes will appear to have an outer edge where the branches all just sort of end in roughly the same area. Again, you can maybe observe and have seen more irregular trees. Sketch and draw all kinds. Right now I'm doing a little bit more of a regular tree canopy. It's just starting to leaf out. I think I've got a bit of a scale disconnect here. This right here looks like it's closer, but it's on the same plane as these, and these look farther away. How do I fix that? So let me just get some dark pigment, try to make this come forward a bit. Another way is you can take the foliage down and detail a bit in scale. So it looks like it's a bit further away. It's not as big. Scale is a problem that I see a lot of that painters have. Maybe add a few of these really fine things. Mainly, I think if I can bring that landform up in front, it might help. A little bit more ground detail. I painted a lot of that foliage with a bigger tip and on the brush, so it looks a bit large in scale for ground cover. So what I finally decided to do is just increase the scale of these trees. Just make them a little taller, just to kind of aid in the visual effect. That and just, adding a highlight here to bring this hill forward a little bit in an overlap. Could even go in here and just stroke in a few of these continuing branches on the outer edge. All right, so we're coming back to this now. You're seeing this recording almost a week later. Well, not almost, it is a week later. I've had this sitting, waiting to finish up this video, but it's given me plenty of time to look at and assess what I wanted to do. I've been working on kind of working the edge in this area into that light field-like spot. Right now, I'm just adding little bits and pieces of contrast towards the base. I wanted to deepen that contrast some and break up the edge, basically. And also, between the time of the rest of the video that you watched and this, I was on Art School Live with Eric Rhodes, and we dealt with this very composition and how to treat these edges, some techniques for treating these edges. So I will leave a link below to that episode or to that Art School Live, which was recorded. We had a whole other version of the same composition, cooler colors, more greens. And on that episode, we talked about what some of the techniques are for treating these shapes to keep them from looking cut out and integrating them within or into this lighter ground area. But I'm coming back to this one and just adding the bits and pieces. And in that video, I talk about bits and pieces. Bits and pieces are just these little detail marks. And they're best done near the edge of contrast, because that's where your eye picks up detail on contrast edges. Another thing I wanted to do is enhance some shadow that might be cast on the ground here. And just add some of that contrast. It's always interesting to come back to these after a good bit of time, days sometimes, and just see how it hits you. You will notice things. I mean, sometimes it actually looks better. I've had a lot of pieces that I've looked at days later and I thought, oh, that's not as bad as I was wondering if it would be. But a lot of times you'll catch the little things, the little improvements that you might want to make. And the tweaks right now are not big. They're not major. They're just little things. And I always recommend that you don't detail for detail's sake. You detail because it does something specific that you think it needs. That's kind of an important concept. Some people will just detail and detail and detail, just thinking that adding more detail will make it better. That's rarely the case. It needs to be very considered, because it will balance something, because it will define something, because it will change something in a positive way. Always have a reason for detailing something. If it doesn't need it, don't do it. All right, for now, I think this is good. I've got this area looking a little better and more integrated up here. Let me know what your questions are about this technique. And go check out that Art School Live with Eric Rhodes episode, where you'll get a little more instruction yet about how to do these edges. I've removed the tape and I'm pretty happy with what I have here. Thanks everyone for watching. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, patrons, for supporting this channel. You're the ones that make this channel happen, and we'll see everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.